Hello everyone, Meteorologist Carly Smith here. I've already seen a couple of you commenting on the Facebook live stream. Thanks for joining. We are talking everything Beryl. We have Brett asking, since the water's so warm, is it possible it can strengthen back up? And that's exactly what we're seeing. The forecast tapping into is the warm Gulf water and also a potential kind of shift in some of the wind shear in the Gulf and the time that it has to remain in the Gulf. So the biggest change so there's updates every 3 hours, right? We get a new reading from, I'm not sure how often the hurricane hunters are going in exactly, but there's an update on the intensity every 3 hours at this point. So we've got an update that comes out at 1 a.m. Then we've got an update with a new cone at 4 a.m. Then we have an update at 7 a.m. and then a new cone is updated at 10 a.m. And so this is the latest information with the new update. Beryl is still a Category 4, but the biggest difference between right now and this morning during first edition is that it's moving much slower. So we've got a west-northwest wind at 18 miles, or not wind, a west-northwest direction. So as it's approaching Jamaica, it is slowing down, which can happen as it interacts with land because of the friction. The friction slows down the wind essentially, and so you get slower wind at the lower levels of the hurricane, and you get the fast wind still continuing across the upper levels of the hurricane. So we've got some strong wind that is happening for our Category 4 storm, but we also have some shear interacting as it interacts not only with Jamaica, with that near landfall approach there, but Haiti, the Dominican Republic, that Hispaniola island there. It's interacting with Beryl and creating some of that shear, as well as just the atmospheric pattern that we're seeing is creating wind shear with Beryl. But it is still a Category 4 hurricane. As we continue through the morning update, this storm is going to likely strengthen back to a Category 1 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. So there is still a lot of discrepancy and a lot of unknowns with what's going to happen once the system gets in the Gulf of Mexico. But something that's been consistent, the forecast has consistently had the high pressure split, right? So this is what we've been talking about for quite some time now. It's been a while, but I just want to show it to you because it has been so consistent. So this area of high pressure, see how it's kind of this large subtropical high that stretch pretty much, there's two kind of centers, but they're taking over much of the southern United States, right? This trough up here to the north is bringing a cold front down into the weekend that then separates these areas of high pressure. So we get the separation, and that's why you see some of these models turning to the north, because it rides the edge of that first high north toward Texas, or it continues on the path that it's been on, following northwest into portions of Mexico. So there's still a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot more model congruency up until the point when those high pressures split and kind of stay split, right? So what you see here is the Euro has been inching further north. I wish I had a comparison to show you. I'll work on that maybe for tomorrow. But you see the European, I think Alan Holt, meteorologist Alan Holt, of course, we're a team and we work together throughout this entire event, me, myself, Faith Colbert, as well as meteorologist Kristen Wallace. So it's a team effort. We're all discussing what we think and what we're looking at and little nuances in the forecast. But the main thing that I've noticed is all of these little spaghetti plots are now north of Tampico. So Tampico, Mexico has been kind of the target zone for the last several tropical waves and tropical storms that have moved through. So we had Alberto, and we also had Chris that made landfall in a similar location there into Mexico. And now we have Beryl, which is still eyeing for that location, but all of the model trending has been further north. So the odds of a landfall between Brownsville and Tampico are going up as the models continue to hone in on that location. Now there's still some outliers. The H-WRF, that is a very reliable high-resolution model that I use a lot during severe weather. I'm not as familiar with it during hurricane season, but it's an outlier at this point. It's far out into the Gulf, and it's trying to stick around the edge of that high, and that's the one that has chances to impact Louisiana and Houston. then the GFS is kind of skirting along the land as that high pressure pulls it to the north. And so the strength that Beryl is, once it gets into the Gulf, is going to play a big role in where it goes as well. But the main difference between today and yesterday is we are seeing a northern trend in all of the models. Now, the GFS has consistently had a curve. The Euro has just been slowly inching a little bit more northwest in its angled approach. The Euro has consistently been farther south than the GFS. They've both been in separate camps that whole time. The European is typically a more reliable model than the GFS, but that's just a typical thing. Not every storm follows the path of the other storm and follows the intensity of another storm, so it's hard to just rely on one model. That's why we look at all of them and have these spaghetti plots. But yeah, something else that's different between yesterday is all of the models are a little bit more in agreement that this is going to travel over the Yucatan for quite some time. So we're not seeing Cancun likely not going to get direct landfall at this point, but the storm surge and the surf, not looking great for Cancun or Cozumel. So I know a lot of people had questions about vacations planned to those areas. I'll hone in on the forecast cone and the timing there in just a second for Cancun and Cozumel, but basically Thursday, so today is Wednesday, tomorrow is when we see really landfall likely there in the Yucatan Peninsula. Swell probably already increasing there, and then as you continue, well, not yet because it's over here. So Thursday morning, swell's going to pick up. Thursday night we could have landfall, and then as we head into Friday, that's when it moves into the Gulf. And so Friday is when we're going to have a really good idea on the timing. But if we wait until Friday to start talking about this with confidence, right, then if we're saying Category 1 or possibly even in Category 2, hurricane is headed right for Corpus Christi, you're not going to have enough time to make your preparations. Now you've got time to at least do some of the minor things, so then you're prepared for the bigger things once they come. And so it is hurricane season, so making sure you have your hurricane shutters or your plywood ready to go is not a bad idea, whether the storm comes for us or not, right? So it's better to be prepared, then you're less scared and less stressed if a storm is headed your way. But if we wait till Friday to make if we wait till Friday to talk about it, right, the forecast guidance is going to be much better on Friday, but if we wait till Friday to talk about it, then it's almost too late. So that's why we're talking about it now, so everyone has time to prepare. But Friday we're going to have a much better handle. Really Thursday evening, once we know where it's heading the Yucatan, that's going to help play a role. And then additionally, Friday, once it gets into the Gulf, we're going to have a much better grasp on the modeling by then. But as you see, it would be likely Saturday evening we start to see some impacts. Landfall would likely be Sunday morning and possibly Monday. So I accidentally set a pause point that jumps it back to the Yucatan. But as you can see, Monday morning also still a possible landfall. Odds are it slows down a little bit in the Gulf. The National Hurricane Center has been tapping into that with every update of their forecast. So currently Category 4 still as it is approaching Jamaica. We should see it weaken to Category 3 later today as it continues to interact with Jamaica. But with that being said, the Hurricane Center forecast now continues to have it at 7 p.m. this evening as it's crossing over on the opposite side of Jamaica. Still a Category 4 storm with 130-mile-per-hour winds. Weakening, this is where the wind shear is. So when we take a look at the wind shear forecast, so there's half wind shear that it's interacting with, the northern side's interacting with the shear. Once we start to get there into the western Gulf, we've got wind shear on a little bit more of the system, and it's out ahead of it. So right now, it's kind of north of it, and then once it gets ahead of it, that's going to hinder it a bit. But still expecting a Category 2 landfall there at the Yucatan Peninsula. Weakens to Category 1 tropical storm once it gets into the Gulf. There is expected to be some wind shear in the Gulf, which would keep it a tropical storm. However, look, the wind shear weakens. So we get just the green colors. There's no blue colors, right? So that's not a lot of wind shear. Probably not a lot to keep it on the weaker side. And essentially, that's why there is a chance that it does pick back up to a Category. Actually, this latest model, that is very interesting because we've got this kind of upper level low that I've been marking on this map, which is what's supposed to create the wind shear with the high pressure to the south, but it's kind of moved. So this essentially, this high pressure is coming over here, which is what's going to help steer it a little bit more north also. This is far upper level winds. So, sorry, I quit talking, but I was interested in what this high was doing because that is new information to me. We get this high. That is new and that is different. So a lot of changes. That's why there's still uncertainty. Upper level data is some of the worst data we get because we really only get it sometimes from airplanes, but also weather balloons is really the only way we get this upper level data. And so those are only launched from certain locations at certain times. And so the models can only use that data for so efficiently, right? So upper level data is tough, but yeah, it does look like we do see the high pressure try to move in, and that's going to work to try to steer it a little bit more north likely. And this is the European model now showing that. So that is interesting, but it's also going to weaken our shear, which is not great. We don't want that to happen. So that's why we're seeing the increase to Category 1. There's less wind shear. I don't know why this low keeps like jumping around and not following my commands, but that's what happens when you edit on the fly. So here's again the latest forecast model. We have this landfall essentially could happen anytime. If it stays out to sea a little bit longer, it could not have landfall till after Tuesday. If it hits Mexico much quicker, if it follows the European, it would probably be Sunday. Sunday, the further south, and Tuesday, the farther north it goes. And that still dramatically changes the impacts that we see. The one impact that we're going to see regardless of the location is going to be the high surf. And so the latest surf forecast has high periods, 3-foot swells right now. We have still 25 to 30-foot swells on the far northern or right around the eye of this storm. So Jamaica is starting to see those really high swells taking shape. Now let's get to the swell forecast. So here we have it, Hurricane Beryl, as it comes through the Caribbean. What we see is there's some of the impacts again to Cozumel and Cancun, right? So that is going to be some dangerous storm surge, very dangerous surf, rip current conditions, danger on these local beaches in the Yucatan Peninsula. Not the best holiday forecast. Granted, it is an American holiday, but we like to travel. So yeah. For anyone with cruises, this stays out of the Gulf of Mexico until you start to feel the wave action picking up in the Central Gulf on July 5th. So that's Friday. So on Friday, you really start to notice the wave action picking up. By Saturday, this is in the Gulf, and it's impacting anyone's travel really between Texas and the Caribbean or the Yucatan. And then this is why. So this swell forecast is the GFS, which has landfall much further north, but that creates much more rainfall for the coastal bend. But essentially, so I don't know if the swell action is going to be quite this high. So this is like the extreme northern turn variation. But before it turns north, even if it keeps going straight on this path, this is very congruent. You get the higher swell typically on the northern side of the storm, so this isn't too far off. I think Sunday, so Saturday, let's see, Saturday at the beach would probably won't be horrible. I do want to mention we've got a new moon Friday, so the days following the new moon, we do tend to have higher tide anyway that can sometimes create coastal flooding on its own. So coastal flooding could start as early as Saturday. We've got a wave forecast that's about 2-4 feet. So yeah, it starts to pick up Saturday. Then as we head into Sunday, that's when the waves become really dangerous. So Sunday really is our big impact day. That would be Sunday. Port Aransas wind. See, this model keeps it far south, so the wind isn't that strong. Watch what happens when I change this to the European model. I don't know if we have European waves on here or not. We do. I feel like the wind I do use, oh, so I had European wind with GFS waves because they tend to be in more agreement than not. There's little nuances that have them off, but yeah, so now we actually, I want to switch to the GFS wind. So I'm going to go, actually, hold on. I'm thinking out loud. I apologize if you're getting confused and not following. Okay, so right now this is both the European guidance. So overall, the European wave action underperforming at this point because we do have swells that are already exceeding 20 feet there in the Caribbean, and the wave forecast is not showing that by any means from the European model output. But what you see here is even with that more southern landfall, our swells still get up to 6-8 feet possibly in the coastal bend Sunday night and then into Monday. So Sunday and Monday would be when we see 6 to 8 foot swells. Periods looking pretty long, also could be around 10-11 seconds, and so that longer period and the larger swell combined, that allows more water to go up on the beach, and then the rip current tries to bring that water back out. So dangerous rip currents, especially Sunday. Saturday may wind up being an okay day at the beach if you absolutely are trying to go to the beach, you have a vacation. Saturday would be the day I would try it, but keep an eye on the forecast. I'll leave it there. As of today, I'm going to try to go to the beach Saturday, but unless I'm working, but I am going to be keeping an eye on the forecast. So if things change and escalate, you don't want to go to the beach. I still wouldn't suggest driving down Padre Island National Seashore because you don't know how things will escalate, right? So you could get stuck and need help, and then the water comes up and you're out there longer than you planned, and then you're in a real dangerous situation. So driving way down along Padre Island National Seashore, not the best move. But you do see with the more southern landfall there just north of Tampico, we get the largest swells and the most storm surge into Mexico, and so we shouldn't have quite as high storm surge the farther south the storm goes. However, coastal flooding, minor coastal flooding, I still would anticipate because we're getting the larger swells and we're getting the higher periods, and additionally we're still getting onshore winds that are not looking super strong but are still going to pick up over the weekend. So not the best beach conditions. You combine that with the new moon, coastal flooding, parking, things like that, not going to be great. Lots of stuff getting tossed around in the currents as well, lots of crazy currents anticipated. So I can't emphasize enough that this is not a great beach weekend, especially if you don't know what you're getting into. And so please err on the side of caution. Now I'm going to switch both of this to the GFS because the GFS will intensify things quite a bit for us. So now we have Sunday. I didn't change the wind direction. So this is Friday. GFS still giving us some wave action on Friday, but that's more so from just our local wind. This is Saturday, this is Sunday. So what you see, I didn't change the wind arrows. Not sure how much of everything you're paying attention to, but if anybody is used to reading maps, then you're going to realize that the wind arrows are off. So we're going to change those. Maybe now it's frozen. There they go. They haven't caught up yet. So Beryl is still over here. There we go, there we go, there we go. So, okay. I keep saying okay, I apologize. It's still not catching up. The wind arrows are right here. But look, I just want to emphasize GFS erring on the northern side of the cone, more impacts on the northern side of the cone and outside of the cone. So it's, I know you probably have gotten on here and you're like, Carly, just make a call. And I want to explain to you all the variables and then discuss what I anticipate will happen. So right here, even if the GFS was to follow the center of this storm cone by the National Hurricane Center, I still think Corpus Christi winds up with more than what the European is signaling. I think it's going to be a little bit more north than the European. I don't know if it's going to be quite as far north as the GFS. I'm not making that call yet, but I do think, especially as far as the surf goes, 25 mile per hour sustained winds very likely on our Sunday, possibly 30. Then if we do have more of a direct impact, which you briefly saw, I don't know what happened to it. There we go. So GFS has more of a direct impact on Monday with tropical storm force winds, sustained winds in the coastal bend. And that's when things would be very messy. So Monday, with a more northern track and a more northern turn, landfall would likely be Monday. With a more southern track, it would likely be Sunday. So Sunday and Monday are still our action days. And that is because right now, really, no matter if it goes further south, we saw the European model outlook, or further north, we're going to have the crazy surf and dangerous rip currents. How much storm surge still depends on how far north or how far south it goes. But the surf, the waves, they're going to get bigger, they're going to get stronger, regardless of the outcome. It's more so just how big and how strong. And so around here, like the last storm we had maybe 10, 11-foot waves with Alberto. And you saw the problems that created. There were some other portions of the forecast that I'm not talking about right now also, which is the wind and the fetch across the Gulf and all of those things. But the point I'm trying to make is Sunday, don't try to head to the beach on Sunday. But keep an eye on the forecast because, of course, it can change. Monday, don't try to head to the beach. The wave action is going to be really crazy, especially if we are getting more of a direct hit on Monday, then that will be extremely dangerous, no matter the strength of the storm. So I'm anticipating at least 8-foot swells, if not higher. On top of that, typical high tide from a new moon, coastal flooding definitely likely. How much inundation we get that impacts areas such as Rockport, North Beach, and so forth is still a little bit of a question mark because that really does depend on how far south or how far north it is and the intensity of the storm. So we're kind of waiting, I'm waiting on the National Hurricane Center to really start to make that call because they're the experts at forecasting that when it comes to tropical systems. And then I take their forecasts and I really over-analyze what that means for our local area. So I'm waiting to pull the gun on that, but high surf is likely. And so with our new graphics, we do have alert days. And so for us, July 6th through the 8th, more so the 7th and the 8th especially, we're anticipating the elevated surf. So avoid the beach, especially getting in the water, especially if you do not know what you're in for, is what we're going. So I'm going to look through some of these questions because I have ignored them, and I'm going to go back to the forecast cone. An important thing to remember, I put this out on the website yesterday, and I made a video about it on Instagram Reels, Carly Smith WX, that's my page. I don't post a ton of weather updates there, but if you tag me and stuff on your story, if there's video that you've got, I'll do my best to share it throughout this event. But yeah, so here's the forecast cone. I'm going to look through some of the questions and see what y'all are wanting to know and if I'm answering your questions or just confusing you even more. So, okay, Saharan dust, let's see. Brett talked about it not really looking like it's going to slow it down much. That is fairly accurate. So it's been in this kind of this Saharan dust hole, but you do see the Saharan dust trying to get wrapped around it. Let me turn on the Saharan dust on here also so we see the current. I think I have it on here. There it is, contour. So there's some Saharan dust all around it, but what's making it in the system is not much. This is overall a fairly light plume of Saharan dust. So you see over here a much darker plume of that, or the yellows, that indicates a much more intense or dense plume of the dust out ahead of this storm. Is fairly light. What's going to happen though is this stuff on the backside is going to wrap around it and introduce itself into it in the forecast, which you'll see that here. So you'll see how the dust kind of spins. That's it spinning into the hurricane. And so we see this a lot of times. We'll show, I wonder what the water vapor looks like. Anyway, I was going to say a lot of times we'll show during severe weather the water vapor imagery where there's dry air and moisture, and where those are mixing, you can get strong to severe thunderstorms. But hurricanes and severe thunderstorms, they work totally differently. They're mesoscale versus large scale, small scale versus large scale situations, and so they work very differently. But so behind Beryl, so this is Beryl right here, you see a lot of dry air that is inhibiting that second area. So we do still have that second chance of development that shows up on the wave forecast. I have not updated this graphic because I've been so focused on Beryl. So it has a 20% chance of developing over the next 7 days. Yeah, that's what it shows, but it's covered up by Barbados. So there's a lot of dry air in between that tropical wave and Beryl, but there's a lot of moisture where Beryl is focused. And that plume of Saharan dust out ahead of Beryl and what we've been dealing with, you kind of see it here where it's black or darker gray. That's dust, likely keeping that air dry, but it's not as dry as what's behind Beryl. And so what happens is, as Beryl starts to interact with the Yucatan, we can get this plume of dust to catch up to it and kind of get wrapped into it, and that would weaken it as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, but that's a very big if. But the dust is what's responsible for keeping us from having a 1-2 punch, essentially, at this point, as this secondary wave has a lower chance of developing, whereas Beryl is just thriving in this environment. So pretty crazy conditions if you overthink it. But yeah, that was a good question. So here is our high pressure that's moving over the Four Corners region, and that's what this is. So we have high pressure here. You can even see, I don't have it in like a play mode, but you can see it spinning with the swirl action that's happening. And then we have low pressure that is creating some rain there in the central United States. And then we have this weaker high pressure over here, which is actually helping bring a few showers on the Texas coast, southern Louisiana, increasing kind of our tropical moisture, or Gulf moisture a bit, with a few storms there right along the coastline. But overall, this is our big look at our weather pattern. This is the big area of dry pressure, so it's a lot stronger than this one, and that is fascinating to think about. But these two together have been creating this combo ridge, this subtropical ridge that the tropical systems have been following right into Tampico. But if this low gets them to weaken enough, that's the window that opens it up to turn to the north. I think the earliest tomorrow we'll have an idea. I would say, what is today? Today is Wednesday. Friday is the absolute earliest I think we'll have confidence in a forecast, but that only gives you Friday, Saturday, Sunday to prepare. How was your experience, Mary, with with those two big ones, Carla and Celia? Would you stay again if you did stay? What exactly will we get from this storm? Okay, so I haven't put out exact numbers. We can, you know what, let's just look at the rain. So this was Laura Luna asked, how is the bluff going to be impacted? Where does the National Weather Service have Beryl going? So that's the cone that is pretty much anywhere from Victoria down to Tampico, Mexico. And I say Victoria, it would really be more like Matagorda Bay. That's about how far the cone stretches now at this latest update. This is rainfall. Did I update this where it updates automatically? Yes. So this is today through Sunday. They're targeting Brownsville for the heavy area of rain from the Weather Prediction Center. And that is, let's see, 2.5, 3, possibly 4 inches of rain. We can turn on the 7-day reach. And that includes, so this is tapping in, this is like a combination of both the GFS and the Euro. I do think there is if it gets anywhere close to Brownsville, it likely will turn north a bit more than if it stays closer to Tampico. So the big takeaway is if you want rain, it needs to come a little bit further north. If you don't want to worry about wind damage, it needs to stay further south. But right now, this is the Weather Prediction Center's forecast. They're the rainfall experts. And so they have us with, I would say this is a high-end chance at this point because watch what I'm going to show you next. Okay, I'm going to get rid of these plots because we don't need them. We don't need to know exact to the decimal point estimation. This is just a forecast. So I just played this through Wednesday, unless it's being slow. Okay, it was being slow to load. But this is the European forecast. This is the European model. Basically, a lot of nothing, right? Let me add in Mexico. So if it takes the European track, it's going to look a lot different. We're going to see the high, heavy, and rainfall staying in Mexico, and Texas barely gets anything. At least through Wednesday, there is a chance that that high still steers it north. But if it goes too far west, it's going to tap into that high over the western United States, which is right here where there's this big old hole of no rainfall whatsoever. So this big old area of high pressure would pull it further west, and we would miss out on the rainfall. This high pressure over here is pretty weak. Let me zoom back out. So you see it when you watch the rainfall, how it moves. You see it about right there. think it kind of moved south, if I remember right. Which is, again, what would help turn it a bit more north. But you could just tell with the fact that rain is happening in this area that this high is weaker, whereas no rain is happening at all in this area, which means this high is a lot stronger. So if this high was stronger, I would be more confident in a turn north, but this high is stronger, and so that's why I'm nervous or anxious to say this is going to go north, right? But this is how I have the impacts as of today. Tomorrow I'll try to make more of a call. I'm going to do my best to make a call after discussing with Alan, you know, what call there is to make. We made a call on the dangerous surf. That's happening. The heavy rain is trending higher. With more and more models trending further and further north, we're going to see more and more rainfall in the days to come if that trend continues. Damaging wind will get higher. That's trending higher. The further north this goes, the more likely we'll see some stronger wind gusts. With that being said, over here, we are anticipating, we are under the chance of tropical storm conditions, but look how wide that chance is at the end of that cone. Pretty wide, right? So it's not great. It's not narrowed down, but anywhere within the western Gulf of Mexico has a chance to see tropical storm conditions. There's another model. This gives a percentage. So essentially, we have a low percent. Is this updated? Yeah, it says latest run. So this now is the probability of a high-end tropical storm if it will load. Okay, this is a strong tropical storm. So we are not quite all the way in that probability just yet. And then this is the weaker tropical storm, which we are in a low 10 to 20% chance of those tropical storm winds impacting us here in the coastal bend. So it's not zero, but it's not, we're not confident yet. And that's the big takeaway. When it comes to hurricane strength winds, so you can see the forecast we're anticipating, we're tapping into the model data and saying, yes, there's a chance that this does peak around category 1, but at this point it is still a low chance. There's not high confidence in that scenario happening out, but it's a high enough chance where it's worth talking about and putting on the forecast. So again, everything is trending up. The further north this goes, the more impacts we're going to see. The further north, the heavier rainfall, the higher chance for those tropical storm or greater wind gusts. Dangerous surf, no matter what. Tornadoes, really possible no matter what also at this point, because those come more so in the outer bands. So for farther south, we could wind up with a greater chance of seeing the tornadoes like we saw in Rockport with the last tropical storm, Alberto. So very important details. Here's a reminder kind of about boarding up. Right now, we're anticipating tropical storm wind. But with it reaching category 1 strength potentially in the Gulf of Mexico, a more direct landfall would bring the chance for 74-mile-per-hour winds sustained, and that would require boarding up to protect your windows. So before that, it's kind of a gray area. It's up to you whether or not you want to take that extra step to board up with the chance of tropical storm winds. But if we become more confident in hurricane force winds, that is definitely going to be a time where boarding is going to be necessary. Rainfall, again, very dependent on the path. So I used this graphic this morning. If it stays too far south, then we are still anticipating very little rainfall. If it skirts up the coast or comes further north, then we're going to see a lot more rain. And that would be Sunday, Monday into Tuesday, but especially Monday and Tuesday because it would be moving slower for it to take that more northern turn. So yes, essentially what you should get out of this are there's still a lot of unknowns, but we're trending more towards seeing more of an impact. So we are alerting for at least poor beach conditions and poor coastal locations with higher tide and rough surf. And that timeline can be found here. Falfurrias, you're a little far inland, so that's a tough call also. So the GFS, skirts, I would say your worst case scenario would be this MVGM model. If the GFS stays along the coast as long as it does, then you're not going to see too strong of winds. But, and the rain really typically is on the more right side of the storm, right and north. So you wouldn't see the heaviest rain in the GFS scenario, and you also would not see the strongest wind, because that is also on the right front quadrant, so that's the right north side of the storm. But you're still at risk for the potential of some tropical storm strength wind gusts at this point, and the chance for a possible quick tornado spin up. Again, if it stays along the coast, that chance might be a little lower, but a scenario with this NVGM model or the NGX, so this white or blue model, really anything that's closer to Brownsville and goes inland would give you more rain and risk of some of the stronger wind and tornado threat. But it's even a tougher call. Falfurrias has a better chance of seeing nothing than Corpus Christi does, essentially. But the closer to Brownsville, the better for rainfall, and the better is a weird word when you're talking about wind that could be damaging, but the better chance for some damaging wind also. The beach conditions, Saturday would be the earliest, but Sunday and Monday is likely to have poor beach conditions, Matthew. Cindy, same answer there. Earliest Saturday, worst Sunday, Monday. So that fishing trip, it would be nervous about, Love Faith. I would see if you could change that date or rebook really at this point. Traveling out to Big Shell is going to be hazardous. I know Padre Island National Seashore has already made posts about them suggesting no camping over this weekend. So it's the getting back. I don't have a great storm surge forecast at this point, but high surf and high tide likely will lead to coastal flooding, and you don't really want to get trapped down there or with a higher tide or storm surge. So I think someone asked a question that I want to go back to. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Need an idea of how bad it will be. Right now, I'm leaning toward about like Alberto. Right now, rainfall looks less than Alberto. Every storm is different. It's just easy to compare what we just saw. At this point, as of 10:58 a.m. on July 3rd, rainfall looks less than Alberto, but that could change. If we see a scenario closer to the GFS, we easily could have 6-7 inches again. But right now it's trending less. Wind is trending possibly higher than Alberto. We saw tropical storm gust. I don't think we quite saw too many sustained wind reports that were tropical storm strength. This storm could bring us sustained tropical storm force winds. So I think the wind is trending a little higher than Alberto. The surf is trending about the same, potentially higher than Alberto. So that means the storm surge could potentially wind up higher than Alberto also. The big difference is the Yucatan. So the Yucatan is going to take a big brunt of what's coming out of the Caribbean and kind of reset the surge that will come our way. It would come more so from the southern Gulf. And it's only going to have about 2 to 3 days to kind of pile up and get strong, whereas Alberto kind of sat and gave us that long fetch across the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. So here, let me try to draw out what I mean. So this is the swell right now, right? The worst surge is going to be right here toward Jamaica, unfortunately. I hate to say that, but right there. So this water is also going to be pushed toward the Yucatan. But this is a big enough piece of land where the water is going to get pushed into this land, but then it's gonna like essentially reset. So there might be some swell that sneaks through the gap right here, and that would bring us slightly higher waves, which would get us closer to Alberto or higher. But essentially, the wind is what drives waves and what drives surge. And so the stronger the wind, the higher the surge, also the higher the wave. And so with Alberto, we had this like long fetch for several days actually that brought waves not only near our beach a little higher, but it brought these larger swells that came pretty much all the way across the Caribbean, through the Gulf of Mexico and right to the coastal bend, which enhanced our tide forecast, even though landfall was way down here. So this storm, if it gets closer to us, would likely bring similar storm surge, if not higher than Alberto. But if it stays further south, the storm surge would likely be less than Alberto, because you would have to be right near the storm to get the strongest winds and the highest surge. We won't have that long fetch that's pushing more and more water across the Gulf of Mexico. So I hope that makes sense. I would say as of right now, prepare for at least similar conditions to Alberto, but not everything is the same. So like I said, I think wind has the potential to be worse. Surge could be worse the further north it goes. Rainfall at this time, I'm keeping less than Alberto, but that easily could change. And yes, I think that's the main hazards. Tornadoes, about the same as Alberto at this point, the tornado threat. So right now I just have it marked as a trend. Tomorrow I'll try to put numbers to the trend, and then Friday we'll have 2 days of numbers to compare. Alan won't help. That's what a comment says. I'm not asking for Alan. I mean, we're a team. We all help each other, but I'm not like, help. Mark, if you want to guarantee some rain, I'd say wash your car right now. But if you want to wait, we do have rain in the forecast next week. We stay a little unsettled. That tropical wave is going to come up. Let me look at, where is my upper level map? I don't think I adjusted this. I didn't use this in my forecast today on TV. So you can't see the cone has gotten smaller, or the uncertainty has gotten smaller. These were arrows I drew yesterday, right? But it looks like, okay, so this used to highlight where that tropical wave was. We're gonna get rid of that. So the tropical wave, I'm gonna use a pointer. So the tropical wave is here, July 6th. Then it looks like it's about moisture, at least from it, is about here, July 8th. Alberto is here, or not Alberto, I'm getting them confused. Beryl is right here, so we have the tropical wave here on July 8th. And then moisture, tropical moisture, makes its way up July 9th. So it looks like, especially along the coast, we do have a chance of rain the 9th and the 10th, with or without impacts from Beryl. So that's something to keep in mind too when it comes to just rain in general. But Beryl, this is interesting that at least the cone is getting a little a little bit more narrowed day by day, in case you were worried it wasn't. It actually is. Okay, so we have this graphic. This is for Renee asking about when to make the call. So, okay, here's the hurricane action timeline. So it's a little difficult to read the colors. I don't know if that helps, but maybe like a lighter blue. It's not technically like our color, our themed color, but we'll stick with it for now. So, okay, so 5 days out. So today is Wednesday. We have Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Right now, landfall would be Sunday or Monday. So we're still trending about 4 to 6 days out. So we're within 5 days, still using some caution with this cone. There's still 410 mile spread and landfall potential. This is when you want to start tasking things, like making sure you have all the boards you need, the screws you need, the nails you need, whatever it is to complete your tasks. Make sure you kind of have those supplies. It's never bad to have that ready during hurricane season, right? So that's what we're looking at. I think this is cut off a little bit. I'm going to go back to it full screen. So day 4 is when you start to identify some impacts. So we're nearing day 4. We've identified the rip current impact, but there is a chance that the rainfall, the flooding potential could go up, and the coastal flooding risk could go up higher, and the wind risk could go up higher, right? So there's a chance of increasing threats between day 4 and day 3. So identify that those are the possible threats. You may need sandbags. You may need to board up. At this point, I don't think anyone is planning or anticipating evacuation unless you just want to do it to not worry about it. But this is what we're identifying for the impacts. Then day 3, so that's going to be Thursday, Friday timeline once we start to iron out when that landfall could actually be. So day 3, you're going to want to prepare for the impacts. We've got a lot more model data, some high resolution data to also include in it. And so somewhere between day 3 and day 2 is typically when evacuation orders are made. Day 2 is when you're going to want to be making decisions. So you have put up all the boards, or you're putting up all the boards. You have your day 2, you're putting up everything. So that would be Saturday for us. And then day 1, anticipated landfall could shift to Monday, but anticipating landfall would be around Sunday. And so that's when you would want to stay vigilant, and it's here, it's coming. So that's kind of an action timeline, and I hope that helps. I will say Friday is when I'm anticipating having my best confidence in the forecast. Tomorrow, I think there's still going to be a little uncertainty, but I'm going to do my best to start making more of those calls on rainfall totals and flooding potential and things like that. Okay, here's a wind forecast graphic. Someone asked about Rockport. I know y'all got the tornado last time, so you're highly anticipating the tornado worry. So here is a current look at the wind speed and gust. Actually, that's not the current ones. Let's go back. And again, there's a lot of missing data across the oceans. We don't have buoys everywhere. Half our buoys seem to not be working half the time. So it's not the best. I'm not going to pretend like it's great when it's not. Okay, so the current wind forecast isn't crazy strong either, but again, there's a lot of missing data that goes into this color contour that we have, so take it with a grain of salt, I think is my best, because we clearly have the hurricane hunters are getting category 4 winds, so we're getting, actually this is wrong, this should be 56. Okay, so clearly we're getting 130 to 156 mile per hour winds, but that's like right at the center. So, okay, if you zoom in a lot, you start to see some pink. Or that could be orange, but I think that's pink. Or at least red. Actually, that's probably orange because we've got yellow. But anyway, we have at least obvious signs of Cat 1, if not Cat 2. The hurricane hunters are picking up Cat 4 winds. So Hurricane Beryl is much stronger than this is showing, but look right outside of it on the south side, that buoy is only reading, well, this is the forecast model. Let's go back to the current data. Okay, so it's reading 13 mile per hour winds, sustained 16 gusts. I don't have any buoys showing up. Let's make sure. I can turn on some data and look around to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yep. No buoy dots showing up in that area. So that's unfortunate. But anyway, these are the current gusts and wind speeds. So the strongest situation is approaching, is on the right front quadrant. So this area is only showing tropical storm force winds based on the color contour, but that has a lot of missing data. So anyway, maybe you're thinking, why even show this, Carly? But so we've got a pretty good chance of some tropical storm force winds or high-end tropical depression winds in this forecast model. This is the European model. So the European model is trending further south and lower for us. This has our buoys getting up to 30 mile per hour gust and 23 mile per hour. So then let's change this to the GFS. Let's change these buoys. Not sure why it won't let me select a wind speed arrow, but Okay, so GFS looks much different. We just saw the Euro, so if we Control Z again, there is the European model, and then we switch to the GFS, and we're getting 63-mile-per-hour winds in Rockport. So you probably would have a lower tornado risk at that point because it's more of a direct impact, but the European would give you a greater tornado risk, being a little bit further south, but still 60-mile-per-hour winds is 97. This is even still keeping Cat 1 in this forecast, which is crazy because it's not even showing that over the Caribbean where it currently is a hurricane. But regardless, this is more so the worst case scenario at this point, I would say, is what the GFS is showing. Best case scenario is what the European is showing. And that's the takeaway I think you should have to prepare with, is I've now shown you the best and worst case scenario. The thing we're confident in, again, and I can't emphasize this enough, is July 6th through the 8th, specifically the 7th and the 8th. You might get away with the beach day if you check the forecast and the current conditions on Saturday, but the 6th and the 7th and the 8th looking like elevated surf and dangerous rip currents, so best to avoid the beach. Yeah, Chris already made landfall. That was on Monday, I believe. It kind of popped up overnight and then made landfall that same day. Right, I don't remember exactly where, but it was in Mexico. It was a beach south of Tampico, I believe, is where Chris made landfall. So we had some elevated surf over the weekend and into the early week, but it didn't cause coastal flooding. So there were very minimal impacts there. Unless you were out in the water getting caught in rip currents, then it was dangerous. There is another tropical wave that is likely going to move into the Gulf, Tara, but at this point there's no signs that it's going to strengthen to much, only a 20% chance of development. Okay, so the Bahamas are more on the northern end. They probably are going to have very minimal impacts. Dang, this is still current. Hold on. Forecast cone. So the Bahamas are well north, closer to Miami, so their wave height on the 5th is looking like it's flat. So I'm not sure when you're headed to the Bahamas. I don't remember who asked that. Tiffany said, traveling to the Bahamas, will it affect the water and weather there? At this point, no. There could be some tropical storms and stuff, but the wave action and the path of these storms is not going anywhere near the Bahamas at this point. Let me try to zoom out. Yeah, so it's just based off the wave forecast, the Bahamas is looking like a great idea. Can I come with you? But yeah, this is the tropical wave right here. So it's going to come into the Gulf too. It's producing, the forecasts have some decently high wave action with it, but it's nothing to worry about at this point. The National Hurricane Center is only giving it a 20% chance to develop. So not too concerned at this point. I think some of this wave action is just because, again, kind of that fetch, that wind. So you see the winds kind of funneling through the gap there between Cuba and the Yucatan, and essentially that's creating between this area of high pressure that's going to be, actually the Bahamas is going to be under the influence of high pressure, which means sunshine, typically. Probably some sea breeze type action, but yeah, I would like to go to the Bahamas. Anyway, yes, we will have to watch the tropical wave that's falling behind Beryl, but at this point, I'm not worrying about it. The National Hurricane Center isn't worrying about it. They've slowly lowered the chance of development. So we're going to focus on Beryl. We're going to get through Beryl, and we're going to have new updates tomorrow. But for now, I am going to always encourage you to download our weather app. KIIITV.com/app is how you can get it on your phone. You can also search for KIII TV or 3 News on your Roku, Apple TV, and there's one more that we have it on, Fire TV. Roku, Apple, and Fire TV. You can search for our app as well. Just search for 3 News, KIII, and it should get you there. And you can stream our newscasts that way, so you don't have to have cable or antenna, and you can watch us that way. So a lot of great tools to have, but our hurricane forecast or tropical update is always posted online. Should be pretty easy to find on the app. We've got our weather tab, we've got a hurricane tab, and we also have the home page, which will have it periodically as well as we update it. So thanks for watching. Storms are unpredictable. Thank you for mentioning that, Patricia, but they are predictable to a certain degree. So like if we were in Miami, Jacksonville, if we were in Florida, it would be a very easy call to say, hey, this isn't coming to us, enjoy. But because we are in the path of possible impacts, it's not easy. So it's easy to call it off, it's not easy to call it on. And that's the way I will explain forecasting for now. But I am gonna end this live update. We have been on for over an hour at this point, and I hope you learned something and have got some questions answered, even though there is still a lot of uncertainty, and I do apologize about that. But thank you again for watching. I'm Meteorologist Carly Smith.